What is Romanticism? Let's explore it together. When we talk about Romanticism, we're talking about a period of time where a group of writers in particular begin to rethink and rearticulate what it means to create art in culture. And this primarily takes place in literature in England in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Now, Romanticisms took place in other places. Germany is a site of a certain type of German Romanticism, which we're not going to be covering today. And that there's an affinity between American Romanticism and German Romanticism, and even the Romanticism that seems to show up in new and different ways in America in the early to mid-19th century. But I want to focus on English Romanticism because I think it's most relevant to us when it comes to thinking about literary history as English speakers. So Romanticism as a concept emerges in the writings of William Blake, William Wordsworth, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. In previous videos, we've even looked a little bit at Blake's poetry and at Wordsworth's writing in the Preface to Lyrical Ballads. But in this video, I want to kind of sum up some of the big principles that the Romantics bring up and that kind of still are with us today. So one of the first important elements of Romanticism is this question of what to do with the previous age. In the 1790s, many things had happened in both Europe and America that had changed our outlook on world history. One, the American Revolution had taken place. Two, the French Revolution was taking place, and some of the first very shocking events had already come and gone, and by the late 1790s, there was this question of what do we do with what just happened in France and what happened in America. Now, the American Revolution, in one sense, was blamed on the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a very complex idea, and Kant even wrote a book called What is Enlightenment? But the Enlightenment in general, we could see as this time period from the early 1600s to the mid to late 1700s, where we have this, especially in Western Europe and then eventually in America, this embracing of reason and this embracing of sort of the rational impulse in man as a guiding principle, both in art, in culture, and in government. And so when you have the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of Independence clearly lays out the reasons for our separation. We have an enumerated list in a very cool and logical manner that give us the right as Americans to separate ourselves from Britain. It's not just we're mad at you and we want to leave. Reason dictates that we should do so. Now, the Romantics, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Blake, and others, began to become uncomfortable with this idea that reason is the main driving factor in life, and it's our reason that we should follow after. And the French Revolution and the American Revolution, especially the bloodshed that was caused by these revolutions, began to, I think, give a sour taste in the mouth. Wordsworth in particular was very conflicted over whether he should, cry "Viva la Revolution" or whether he should mourn about what man has done to man in his own language in lyrical ballads. And so I think one of the first tenets of Romanticism, especially in Romantic poetry, is this rejection of the Enlightenment ideals as not the full picture. There's something else. Now, what is the something else that the Enlightenment is missing? And this, I think, can be summed up in the word feeling. The feeling of man, which includes emotions, sentiments, passions, and maybe even physical sensations. When I look out the window and see the tree, it creates a feeling in me. First of all, I have a vision of it. That is a sort of physical sensation. But also, then it affects my heart. It affects my body. It affects my memory, which is a very important thing for Wordsworth. So one, we say the Enlightenment's championing of reason, that can't be all there is to life. And then two, what about the life of the emotions? What about the life of the feelings? And this rejection of reason and embracing of feeling leads to a real skepticism of education, especially in the formal ways that had been done for generations in England. And so we have this famous example in this poem, The Tables Turn, from Lyrical Ballads in 1798, where Wordsworth says, "Up, up, my friends, and quit your books, or surely you'll grow double." It's sort of a cry to a friend who's, studying away, saying, stand up, quit your books, or you're just going to become sort of a blob that reads. What a horrible life, a blob that reads. Now, for some of us, being cozy and reading for the rest of our life seems an amazing idea. But there's this sense that, the man of Romanticism, and in the Romantics' view, masculinity is caught up with this idea of emotion and sentimentality, though women were very much involved in the Romantic movement, Dorothy Wordsworth and Mary Shelley in particular. This idea that there was the man who just, was the man of reason and studied books all day, he was just going to kind of melt into a jelly of ineffectualness. Or even worse, he would follow his reason to his own ruin. Instead, get up, get outdoors, get into nature, come see into the life of things. This see into the life of things is another phrase from Wordsworth's Lyrical Ballads, which becomes so important. There's something inside you, Wordsworth believed, called your inner eye. And this inner eye isn't just kind of your brain which thinks about stuff or imagines stuff. It is this faculty that God put in you, and the Romantics very much believed in God, and that there was this divine nature that humans had. We have a share in the divine. Now, they weren't always very particularly precise about the share in the divinity. Maybe to be very precise about it would have been to be too much affected by the Enlightenment. But we have this inner eye of imagination. And we have these outer eyes, which are made not to look at books and to squint and to just, crunch numbers in our head. We're supposed to go out wide-eyed in wonder into the world and see into the life of things. And the life of things isn't just looking at the woodpeckers and the trees. Seeing into the life of things means that we see the general philosophical principles which undergird nature. And those philosophical principles teach us morals. You'll learn more of evil and of good from one impression of a vernal wood than you can learn from all the sages. That's another line from The Tables Turned, where you think, reading these books of philosophy is going to help you. The true philosophy is out there in nature. The true morals that are going to make you an upstanding citizen, a good man, a good father, a good writer, a good relator to your friends. That's in nature. And in fact, those experiences you're going to have in nature are going to stay within your imagination, and they're going to feed you on the good and the moral and the fresh and the pure when you have to, go into your ugly study where there are no windows, or going into the busy city. Just sit back, close your eyes, and let your inner eye focus on the beauties you've seen in nature and the ethical principles you've learned from the trees, and you will be continually enriched. I think this is Romanticism in a nutshell. Now, Wordsworth and Coleridge kind of disagree on how they approach these principles. Both of them have these principles of the reason isn't everything. You have this imagination and this feeling in you which needs to be fed. Coleridge is more philosophical about this. His text, Biographia Literaria, talks about how there's a recapitulation of the infinite I am in every human imagination. What exactly does that mean? People debate it a lot. Whereas Wordsworth is more content to say things like, no, you should see into the life of things. You should get the impulse from the vernal wood, which teaches you of man, which sometimes leads us, as we mentioned before, to mourn what man has made of man, but other times helps us become, as he says in Tintern Abbey, a living soul. It helps us truly live to our potential and maybe work against those forces in culture, in ourselves, that would help us treat our fellow man in a wrong way, or urge us to treat them in a wrong way. Nature will help us be redeemed and be more loving. There's also, and I think this is a third thing, a political dimension to this that really prizes the worker, the working class, the poor, and even those who are disadvantaged mentally and physically. There's a poem by Wordsworth called "The Idiot Boy." Now we might see that language as discriminatory or inappropriate now, but Wordsworth doesn't use those words demeaningly. He's really interested in children who we would now call neurodivergent, who maybe don't have people to take care of them in the way that they need, and so maybe have to live a beggar's life. He's very interested in how can I learn not just to pity them as a privileged individual, but how can they teach me about what it means to be human? How can the beggar show me what true life is like? I don't care about the aristocrat. What do I have to learn from him? He's been shut up in his room with books. His mind's all twisted. He hasn't gone and seen into the life of things. But, the poor farmer in the field or the beggar on the side of the road, they know more of life than the rest of us. So we have both this rejection of reason, this embracing of imagination and feeling, this interest in getting away from formal educational philosophical systems, and this trust that we will learn ethics and philosophy from nature, and then this interest in the marginalized in society and how we can learn from them as well. They seem to the Romantics closer to nature than the educated and rich. So this has been a little sketch of Romanticism, especially when it comes to poetry, and we can talk about in later videos how this plays out in individual poems, because we can talk all this highfalutin philosophy, but seeing it worked out in stanzas, in meters and rhymes is where I want to go next. Thanks for hanging out with us today.